So now this is Baruch here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and we're continuing on with this really terrific book from Dr. CHAIM BEINART. It's an atlas of medieval Jewish history, and I'm titling this series, How the Jews Survived the Middle Ages, and in fact we did, and we're still here. It's a problem. We are a problem in the world. So we're going to come over here. This is an area called the Rhineland massacres. It took place in 1298. Now, there was a little bit that was left over from the last year, which I didn't see. We were talking about France, and he said a small number of those expelled moved to Gascony, while the majority were welcomed in the kingdoms of Aragon, which is including Provence and Navarre. Barcelona took in 60 families. In 1315, they were allowed to return, only to be finally expelled in 1394. So you see now the beginning of the movement of the Jews eastward, as they were continuously forced out, in between different massacres going on, living amidst a very violent group. Now, here is a picture. This is a picture from an illustrated manuscript. Came from eastern France, that is close to the German Rhineland, in French Rhineland, and this is a picture from that time. And we have down here, below the statement, the Rhineland massacres took place in 1298. These are depictions of what the Jews looked like, dressed like. Depictions of Jewish figures of the 13th century. Those are the kind of clothes that we wore. So let's come over here. This is a picture. Let's get it a little bit better. See some of the places that we're talking about here. This is Germany. This is the German Rhineland. And all of these little towns or places where Jews lived. We could bring this closer. You could see it a little bit better. But here we are scattered around. So let's find number one here and just go over this. There doesn't seem to be a lot to be said about it at this point. Here we are right here. It says rumor that Jews had stolen a host water from a church. I'm not really familiar with Catholicism, and I'm not sure what a host water is. But this and blood libels and different things that the church came out with were ways of arousing the mobs, and served as a pretext for a mob led by a person by the name of Rindfleisch to attack and massacre Jews. Okay? This is over here in Rottingen, right here in the center of all of this. So let's find number two. Number two says over here in a place called Waldenberg. It's right in here, I don't know. Or near Waldenberg, I got that wrong. It says it's near Enzi, or this area, Rottenburg. I know a lot of Jews have the last name Rottenberg too, Ashkenazi Jews. So the year 8 Av, and this is number two. On the 8th day of Av, now most people know that the 9th of Av is a particularly bad day for the Jewish people, and we live through it every year. 54 Jews are killed. Survivors take refuge in the castle. And the 12th of Av, after 3 days of siege, they're all killed. Next. And this is about in Regensburg. Oh, we've all heard of Regensburg, right? Number 3, Jewish communities of Augsburg and Regensburg, let me see if I got that right, are saved by intervention of local rulers. Number 4. Where is number 4? It says the total number of casualties, 20,000 Jews in 146 communities took place, were besieged by this massacre. So we see all the different places, all the different times, all the different things that were going on. This is a completely Catholic Europe. This is Baruch Fleischman. That's really what I have to teach over here today. Let me see just one more if I could turn the page. Okay, we'll read a little bit, and we'll just come back to, let's see where we can. Now, we're Ashkenaz, and I'm not sure really the origin of that word, but it refers to Jews of Northern European background, or European background. There are different ideas about how it is that the Jews actually wound up with Ashkenaz and Sephardic Jews, and they have different traditions, how exactly that came about. So he says over here, he says, during the second half of the 13th century, anti-Jewish propaganda seriously affected the Jewish communities in Germany. On 20 April 1298, a massacre, instigated by a host desecration libel. Now, once again, we're back into this idea, so I'm not sure what a host desecration is, but it doesn't take much. So he said, by a spread from the Franconian town of Rottingen to many other areas. The inflamed mob, led by a German knight called Rhineland, went from town to town, inciting the population of Franconia, Swabia, Hesse, and Thuringia to slaughter the Jews. This they did with extreme cruelty, destroying entire Jewish communities. Among those killed in Nuremberg were Rabbi Mordechai ben Hillel and his entire family. Between 1336 and 1339, a group of lawless German bands known as Armleder, so called after the leaders, the leather arm piece that they wore, it's arm leather. Leather gets the word leather. So that the word their arms, their forearms were covered, I think it's their forearm, were covered with leather. Attacked Jewish communities in Franconia and Alsace, leaving slaughter and destruction behind them. Of particular note was the massacre of Jews in the community of Rufach, Einsheim, Ribenavlo, I don't know how to pronounce it, and Mulhaus. In Colmar, the local population massacred the Jews. When the Armleder began to menace the general peace and security, a number of towns concluded a 10-year armistice with John Zimberlin, one of the Armleder leaders in Alsace. The local authorities tried to restore calm by concluding additional agreements in the Rhine and other areas, but the armistice was short-lived. The Armleder massacres were importance of and preludes to destruction of European Jewry during the Black Death. So the Jews do survive, but we survive many, many massacres. So let's just go over this area here. This is the German Rhineland. It's a picture of the German Rhineland. Let me see if I can bring it back, I'll bet, so we can see it like that. So this is not a historical map, but it's just giving an idea of the different places. All of these different places, we could just pick some out. There's Mayen and Goulburn, and switching down to the bottom of the page. Then we go all the way through the German Rhineland. There are massacres in all of these different places. And, you know, when you read history and it says, well, there's a massacre that took place, we really have a hard time being able to picture that, because it's not like it's like here in the United States, even though there's something more and more dangerous in the United States at this time. But these are places where real people died, real women were raped and kidnapped, ransoms were paid, and a terrible treachery took over, and the Jewish people were extremely, extremely vulnerable. We see the same thing happened on October the 7th. So this is not something new. This is what it's like. This is just a little piece we're going to add on to this on the Pastoreau and Lepers massacres, which took place in the years 1320 to 1321. Like I said, this is not a pretty picture, but nonetheless, in the core of the Jewish people is our God. And that's really what they don't like. They don't like our God. They want their God, or they want their ism. which we have today. Wokeism, today we have woke. Jews are not going to really do a good job with woke. Some Jews will take over and become leaders of the woke, if that's what's going to be. But that's nothing new about that either. They become priests and so on and so forth, become the worst enemies of the Jewish people. A popular religious movement called the Pastoraux, the shepherds, in the town of Aachen, in southern France, or Agen, I don't know how to pronounce it, soon turned into a crusade bent on storming Granada and freeing the last portion of Christian European soil from Muslim rule. Along their route, they turned first on the Jewish communities, which is a pattern. These communities were in southern France, and then on communities across the Pyrenees in the kingdoms of Aragon and Navarre. Pope John the 22nd opposed the Crusaders, and so did James II of Aragon, who, in order to protect the communities of northern Iberia, dispatched his son, Crown Prince Alfonso, to suppress them. This is one of the rare instances of a movement for liberating Christian soil from Muslim domination being destroyed by the party it wished to serve. As if there were not enough, the Jews of Chinon, in central France, were, in 1321, accused of poisoning wells in conspiracy with the lepers who lived as outcasts from society. Let's take a quick look at this map here and see if we can learn something. Now you see here we are in the southern part of France, which is an area that was always, and possibly still today, I'm not sure, full of Jewish people. Here, let's look down a little bit further. The shepherds, which we just described them, wreak havoc in about 120 Jewish communities all around these little towns where we lived, in Toulouse and other places, Albi, Agen, I don't know these pronunciations, as I said. So that's for the shepherds. Jews flee from Toulouse, barricade themselves in the Tower of Narbonne. Viscount of Toulouse orders arrest of Pastoraux, whereupon Jews leave the tower. Pastoraux, freed by town priests, then turn around and massacre 150 Jews. And remember, these massacres are taking place close up with swords, spears. They didn't have machine guns yet. Jewish survivors, number 3, in Toulouse, convert to Christianity. There you go. Rich Jews are killed by Christian guides whom they paid to help them flee to Spain. So we had to find a way across the mountains. We had to have food to get across the mountains. And in the meantime, the people who were helping you, they wind up killing you. Pastoraux checked in attempt to reach Granada. The Pastoraux, which is once again these shepherds. They checked an attempt to reach Granada. Granada is way down in Spain. In an attempt to get all the way there, they're stopped. That ended that series of massacres, and the next we go to will be the, I think we're going to lump this into this period because we're really at the end of its section. Now let's read what's going on over here. Let me see if I can get this in a way that we can see it. The Black Death. The year 1348. This is a woodcut depicting the burning of Jewish martyrs in Ashkenaz, which is Germany, from Schädel's Weltchronik, 1493. Many countries from Spain in the southwest to Poland in the east were hard hit by the great bubonic plague that reached Europe in the year 1348. The non-Jewish population accused the Jews of causing the plague by poisoning the wells. While Jewish casualties of the plague were relatively low in proportion to those of the Christians, the number of Jewish dead was swelled by the massacres. Jews were cruelly tortured in order to extract confessions that they were responsible for disseminating the plague. In many places they were burned at the stake. Pope Clement VI, 1342 to 1352, recognizing the absurdity of the allegations against the Jews, issued a papal bull from the papal court at Avignon in 1348, denouncing the allegations. Charles IV, the Emperor of Germany, and King Peter IV of Aragon tried to protect their Jewish communities, but nonetheless, Jewish casualties were great. He said the Black Death and its aftermath proved a critical turning point for the Jewish communities. In Spain, it represented the beginning of a decline for the communities in Castile and Aragon, not only in number, but also politically, culturally, and economically. We'll see that as we come to the expulsion from Spain. We see the pattern of how it's going. Unfortunately, the Jews survive. And here we are to speak about it. We're coming down here to a map. Let's see how we can do this. How about this? Progression of the Black Plague. So we see the arrow. We'll follow the arrow a little bit. Spread of the Black Plague at 6-month intervals. So this little square here, like this, Jewish community stricken by massacre. Jewish community which defended itself. Okay. So here we have a picture of the Mediterranean Sea. Not sure I could read this map so easily. Let's find number 1. And like I say, they're all over the joint, so here we are. So we're talking about Spain. We're talking about, here we have the Mediterranean world. I guess that's what we're looking at. It's a little difficult for me to read this map. But here we have Constantinople. Gives you an idea of where we're at. This is the Black Sea. And apparently I'm getting an idea what's going on here. This light color here is considered to be landmass. And so here we have the Balkan area, Turkey, Constantinople. Then we have Italy, Naples, Rome, Florence, so on and so forth. Now let's see what the map has to teach us and see if we can get a reading on where we are at. In the year 1347, Genoese and Venetian merchants transmit the plague from Central Asia, so he says the plague began there. Number 2, in the year 1348, a Jewish doctor confesses to having been sent by a rabbi in Toledo to poison the wells. The confession. Number 3. Now here you could see the outline of France going into Saragossa, Toledo, which is Spain. Town participants, let me see if I got this right. Town patricians decide to forbid Jewish residents for 200 years. This is in a place called Colmar. Number 4. Patricians of the town decide to prevent Jews' residence for 100 years. So it's not easy to find a place to settle. Number 5. Charles IV decrees property of expelled Jews or condemned Jews to be transferred to Christians. Number 6. After plague, Charles IV relinquishes his ownership rights over Jews to towns prepared to reinstate them. So he gives ownership rights over Jews to towns prepared to reinstate them. There's the map. These are the different places. And this is where he stops right here, as we're going to go into the next section, which is a big section, until the expulsion from Spain. And we see the small expulsions. As I said before, the massacres took place in general areas, in specific towns, but some towns were spared. And so we continue on with the survival of the Jewish people throughout the Middle Ages.